Hi everyone, so today I will be showing you how to make this Winter Wonderland scene. And even if you haven't painted as much or you're just a beginner to this, don't worry about it. I will be showing you tips and tricks of how to make this painting successful, as well as showing you some of the art supplies that I used and what I go through to make this painting the way that it is. So without further ado, let's get started. So to get started, we will be going over some of the materials that I will be using today. First will be a 4x6 stretched canvas. Next, you want to make sure that you fill a cup with a little bit of water and that you also have a paper towel next to you. We also will be using a wooden palette to put all of our paints on them. So today we'll be using 3 different types of brushes for our painting. And the first one that we're going to use is a flat brush, 3/4 of an inch from Contemporary Crafts. And you can buy this brush at Michael's, AC Moore, or any other art store that's nearby. It's got kind of that flat surface on the top, smooth hairs. And the second brush that we're going to be using today is brush number 6. So this one is from Brush in the Box, and it's got kind of the same concept as the first one, but it's for the other things within the painting, smaller details. And last but not least, we have brush number 4, also from Brush in the Box, and it's got a smaller tip, and it's used for very, very small, finer details within the painting. And we're going to take just a little bit on the top of that pile, and we're just going to stroke the paint in one direction on the canvas. You can start in the middle, you can start in the side. It doesn't really matter. However, you want to make sure that you're going from top to bottom on the paint. You're not going from up and down all the time. You're just going from top to bottom. That way, the paint is all smooth and you're going in one direction, which means that all of the paint will be in one direction as well. And all of the colors will be on the canvas evenly. So right now, I'm just gonna go ahead and fill the entire canvas, just doing the paint stroke in one direction. And we're making sure that we cover each little bit of white space and that we are consistently balancing out the paints that are going through the canvas as well. See how I'm kind of going back and filling in those little spaces that are a little lighter or that are missing a little bit in the bottom. And we want to make sure that, again, we get all of the white space just because it is the blue background. It is going to represent the sky. And we want to make sure all of that is consistent throughout our painting. So this is a little repetitive process, so I'm just going to speed it up just a little bit so that we can see the final result for the background. Okay, once you have the entire background filled, just let it dry for a little bit, and we are going to go ahead on the sides, and we're just going to turn the canvas around a little bit and see how the sides are kind of messy from when I was painting the top of it. We want to make sure that the entire canvas is filled, and that includes the sides, so it doesn't look a little rough there. So we're just going to go ahead with the same exact stroke from top to bottom. We're just going to fill in those little sides as well. You can start on whatever side you want. I just happen to pick this side on the right just to fill in and to start with. Now we're going to go ahead on the other side and we're going to do the same thing. Make sure that you're applying the paint on all of the sides, making sure all of the white space is filled up and that we're not leaving any room for those little lines on the bottom. See how I'm also going through and making sure that I do one final stroke through to make sure that all of the little lines in there from when I was just painting it around are gone. And if you happen to get a little bit of paint on the front too, just make sure that you're blending it in with the top or the rest of the paint that is on the front of the canvas. I'm just going to go ahead and speed this up a little bit. All right, so once we are done with the background, just make sure that you clean off your brush. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna go ahead, kind of give that brush a little swirl in the cup of water. And then take your paper towel and make sure that you just squeeze and pull out the rest of the paint. What this does is it not only makes the brush a little bit drier, it also makes sure that you have all of the paint that is in there, the rest of the blue out of it, so that when we go in with the lighter color, there's no more of that color in there. Okay, so next I'm going to be starting on the moon. So with this, I'm going to be using number 6. And we're going to go ahead and kind of measure out towards the right side, kind of towards the end of the painting, and we're just going to make an outline of a circle. Now, you can also use the number 4 detail brush if you want to, if that's a little simpler. I kind of like the flat angle that it gives me so that I kind of have a thicker outline when I go along here, but it's completely up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with. And I'm just going to go ahead and outline it a little bit, kind of filling it in as I go, kind of using curved strokes, making sure that I curve my wrist as well when I'm doing it. And I'm also filling in those little blue spots as we go, making sure that the whole thing will be white. And as you can tell over here as well, I'm just going to keep going over the lines a little bit just so that it can be sort of a perfect circle or close to it. It obviously doesn't have to be that perfect, but for me, I just want to go over it again and making sure that I have it as close to a circle as possible. So right now, I'm just going to fast forward just a little bit. Okay, so now that we have our moon all set and done, we're just going to take the brush and we're just going to wipe it on the paper towel. We're not going to touch it back into the water. This is just because I'm going to be going back in with the white anyways to leave it after to dry a little bit. And I'm just going to go over that moon one more time. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want to make sure that the moon shines a little bit brighter. And I know sometimes that the first layer of paint doesn't cover it all the way. So I'm just going to go over it again with the number 6 brush. And just fill in the same thing all over again. If you need to wait for it to dry a little bit, that's okay too. I always make sure that the paint is a little bit partially dry before I go over this again. But it's completely up to you. It kind of depends on the paint that you're using as well. So now that we have the moon, the next step is to take our Admiral Blue again. And we're not going to put it in the same spot, but we're going to just be putting it on the side, just a little dot. And then we're going to be taking our white acrylic paint and we're going to be placing it right next to it. This is because we're going to be blending the 2 colors together, and that's why I kind of did that. So I'm just going to take the number 6 brush again. I'm just going to blend the 2 colors together. We create kind of this lighter blue, very light blue, and it's going to be blended in a little bit more white than the blue itself. So as you can see, I'm just trying to take over the white a little bit. And with that, I'm going to be placing a little outline, kind of like how we drew the circle of the moon. We're just going to be going over that again on the outside. We're just going to make a little circle outline again. This is going to be the start to blend the outer part of the moon into the night sky. So we want to make sure that we have a bit of a thicker outline at the end so that we have a little bit more room to play with the blending of the sky and the outer parts and the glow of the moon as well. And so I'm just going to go back and I'm going to consistently add a little bit more blue to my blend. And with this, I'm just going to keep making little lines around it to make sure that we are kind of creating a gradient so that we are going to blend them later on. So now I'm taking my brush and I'm wiping it off, but I'm not putting it back in the water because I want that excess paint in the brush so that I can blend all of them together. And where the two lines meet in the outlines together, I'm just going to be blending them together a little bit. And we're also going to be taking the little bit of blue towards the end and we're going to be pushing the paint out a little bit, creating another outline. And it's totally okay to get a little frustrated with blending. When I first started painting, blending was always something that I struggled with, but now it's one of my favorite things to do. You just have to consistently go back in, create lines, blend them in a little bit more, push the paint off a little bit, kind of experiment to see what kind of movements work best for you. This technique always worked for me, kind of going in with the lighter first, pushing out with the dark, and also going back in, mixing other colors, making sure that they're blended in together as well. And with blending, you want to make sure that you're not heaping the paint onto the canvas. That's just because you don't want a ton of paint all at once in this specific direction, and it kind of gets a little bit messy when there's a ton of paint involved. So again, with this part, I'm just kind of going back in, with the light, kind of making sure that I blend in the lighter parts with the darker parts. I'm pressing the brush a little bit harder onto the canvas so that I have that effect and there's no creases or lines that are in between it as well. And I'm just going to fast forward a little bit just because this process is a little bit more repetitive and it's just basically my blending process all together. This process does take a little bit of time, so if you are getting a little frustrated, take a break or, try a different push and pull technique to make sure that you have everything blended together. All right, so once you blended your moon, we're gonna go ahead. You don't have to do this step, but I went in one more time and just kind of made it another layer within the moon. I just want to make sure that moon is extra bright and stands out from the rest of the blending. And I'm still using my brush number 6 as well, but you can always use this next part for the brush number 4 or the little details in between. It's totally up to you though. So now I'm going to go in with a little bit of the blue and I'm just going to dab the color inside of the moon just to create a little bit of a crater effect. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and blend in, creating a little bit of a circular motion just to blend them all together. And if you're really tempted to push the brush into the canvas, what you want to do is make sure that you hold the brush towards the end of the end of the brush so that you're not totally pressing into the canvas itself. I find myself kind of towards the front of the brush, holding it and pressing into it, but you can prevent that by just holding the brush towards the end. So with this, I'm gonna go ahead and speed up a little bit. It's just me adding a little bit more details and blending again. You want to make sure that you're consistently going in, just going to see whether or not you like the blend style that you did or want to add a little bit more craters or details, use the smaller brushes. That's completely up to you. So next we're going to be going in and creating the little snowy hill in our Winter Wonderland. We're just going to take a little bit of white paint with our number 6 brush And we're gonna go in and measure out towards the bottom about 3/4 of the way. And we're just gonna create a little swoop. So we're gonna create that little curve and we're gonna pull that all the way over and measure that to about the same length as where we started the other part of the line. And we're just gonna go ahead and push the paint down a little bit. And I went ahead and did the same stroke as I did in the background. Everything to me just needs to stay consistent and has to go in one direction. And at this part, I'm kind of noticing that I'm using a smaller brush and I'm putting a lot of paint onto it and it's not looking that well. So I kind of went ahead and switched to a bigger brush once I took out all of the paint on the white brush and things started to dry up a little bit. But I wanted to point out that I went in with this smaller brush to begin with because I wanted that line to be a little thinner so that I can blend everything together. All right, so right here is when I switch the brush over a little bit. We're gonna be using the same technique as I was doing before, you know, just taking the stroke from top to bottom, making sure that we're not pushing the paint back and forth. And we're just filling in those spots again where the blue is, going in and making sure that everything's blended out. That line doesn't have heaping paint blobs all over the place. And that we're just filling in everything that we see over here. So now I'm going to go ahead and speed this up a little bit as this is also very repetitive. All right, so in this part, I'm also going to go ahead and do kind of the same thing I did with the sky. We're just going to go over to the sides and make sure that we have a consistent color that goes along with the hill and whatnot. And that it kind of just wraps around the canvas so that it looks good when you put it up on an easel. Again, I'm going to go ahead and speed up this video a little bit. So I'm kind of starting to notice that we do need another layer. I just let it dry for a few minutes and I went back in and I added another white layer. I want to make sure that snow stands out a little bit and that we are filling in all of the blue spaces. There's no blue left and that the snow is going to look very nice once everything is finished. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and create the trees next. So we're going to be using our number 4 brush. If the camera would adjust and bring up the quality, there we go. So we're gonna go ahead, just dab a little bit of that green color. And we're gonna go all the way to the left part of the painting. And we're just going to make a little bit of a line. You see halfway where the moon is, I want to go all the way down with that line, making sure that it is relatively thin, just a little bit. And we are just painting over that. And with that, we are also going to be kind of making a little bit of a roof or part of a triangle here on either side of that line. And I'm also pulling out that line a little bit to curve towards the end. And I'm also making a couple more lines on the bottom. This is how I make trees personally. And we are going towards the bottom of the tree, making lines one by one and making each line longer than the previous line was. And I want to make about a few more lines just to make sure that I reach the snowy hill a little bit. Now, depending how long you want to make your trees, I kind of made a few more lines. Right now we are up to 7 lines, 8 lines. In total, I want to make about 8 lines for this, and we're just gonna brush the... So right now, I'm just making one big vertical line to line up all the rest of the horizontal lines that I made here. And I'm just gonna go over that a couple of times with the green, making sure that the ends of the tree stand out a little bit more. You can round them out. As you can tell, I'm kind of rounding them out here to make the tree look a little bit more full. And we're just gonna keep going over the green just a little bit so that we have a more alive tree. And so far, it's only half of the tree so far, and we're gonna be going over that once again. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go back in with a little more green, and we're just going to paint the bottom. We're going to give them a little bit of a rounder end, just so that we have that little bottom part of the tree that stands on the snow itself. And I'm just going to go back in with the other half and make the rest of that green. Since we are not really putting the ends of the tree towards the left side of the painting, I'm just going to go in and fill the rest of that as is. And I'm just going to speed this part up a little bit so that we get to the other parts of the tree. So next I'm going to go in and take a little bit more paint, and we're going to make a smaller tree. We're going to go about a quarter of the way down, create another line, kind of the same process as we did the last time. And we're just going to do the same thing, create a little roof there, make a couple of lines that go down from the tree, making them a little bit longer than each one, create the bottom and fill it in. Last but not least, we're going to go in and create one more tree using the same process. We're just going to go basically towards the right end, do the same exact thing that we've been doing for the past couple of trees. And at this point, I'm just going to fast forward. All right, so with this, I'm going to wipe my brush, and I'm going to go in with my number 6 brush, and I'm just going to create another layer within the tree, kind of like we did for the moon as well and the snowy hill. This is just so that we can get a little bit of extra pop on that green. It's important that we have a solid color. I understand that some paints, again, might not have the same effect the first time around, so it's always great to create more than one layer when you're painting, just to get that extra solid color that you're looking for. And right now, I'm just going to go ahead and fast forward this part. All right, so next we're going to be filling in that little shader paint, and we're going to go in on the first tree, the medium tree that we made to the right, and we're just going to blend and place the color a little bit. As you can tell with the moon, this tree kind of has the shadow going towards the right side of it. So we're just going to take that and we're going to push out the brown a little bit, and we are going to blend it out, going back in with the brown, kind of putting it towards the end. And we're also going to do the same for all of the other trees. For the smaller tree, we want to make sure that we have the shadow going towards the left side of the small tree. Just again, pushing that paint out a little bit. And if you have to go back in with the green later on to push it back, by all means, that's what we're going to do anyways. But I just wanted to get the color on it. So for right now, we're just placing the brown on it. Also going back in with the paper towel as needed. Sometimes I have too much paint on the paintbrush and I want to take a little bit of that off. And for last but not least, for the larger tree, I actually made a line going down just so that I can split the tree in half just to see where I'm going with it. And for this, I want to make sure that my shadow is on the left side of this large tree. Again, I'm pushing out the paint towards that left side too, taking that line, pushing out a little bit, going back in with the brown, making more of that, making sure that I'm blending in a little bit more with the green that I have, pushing the blended parts back out towards the right side. And again, if you want to go back in with the green, by all means. Okay, so after you're done blending, you want to make sure that you rinse your brush out. We're not going to be using the number 6 brush for the next step, so just rinse it out, maybe get another cup of water. If it turns to green, making sure we press all of that out with a paper towel and whatnot. Okay, so next we're going to be going in with the number 4 brush again, and we're going to be coming in and doing some of the ends of the tree, making the snow and some of the shadow effects on the snow. So we're gonna go in and we're gonna blend a little bit more white and blue. If the paint already dried out, just make sure that you take out a little bit more paint. And we're making sort of a light baby blue here so that we can place onto the tree. Right now I'm just trying to get the color that I want to. I actually want a little bit darker, but this is just to fill in the shadow. So in the same place where you place the brown shadow, we're just going to make little blobs or piles of the snow so that we have a little bit of a shadow effect. Now this is a little bit more random. I would suggest to put the blobs however you feel that the snow should be applied onto the tree. I make different blob shapes and just dab the paint onto them. Instead of drawing a straight line, I kind of just went along, dabbed them a little bit, and as I'm going down the tree, I'm making different shapes and making sure that I can blend them a little bit more later on. I'm also working towards the other side. Towards the bottom of the tree does have a little bit more of a shadow, so I did towards the bottom go in and add that darker blue into it. And now I'm going in with the white, and I'm just putting the white over the top of it. This is just to add a little bit of a highlight towards that shadow. Again, I'm just using little dabs. I'm just going in and making sure that I'm blending it a little bit along the way. All right, so next I'm going to be going in with that same color again, and we're going to be doing it for the smaller tree and the other tree as well. Basically just placing it where you did your brown shadows. So I'm gonna go ahead and fast forward this so that you can see the end result. Continuing with our number 4 brush, we're going to rinse out the blue, and we're going to be coming in with the white. So we're going to be placing the white line halfway on top where the line is, and we're just going to be doing the same technique and concept that we were doing on the other side with the shadow, but instead we're just making sure that we have that big highlight of that snow. It's because of the moon that's reflecting off of this tree. On that side, there's more of a highlight. Since we're using the same technique on this tree as we did for the other shadows, I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this a little bit. Make sure that if you don't like how light the white is becoming, to make another layer on top of it. You'll kind of see this as I fast forward through it, kind of what I did, or going back into the painting and making sure that everything's covered, or at least to the opacity that I kind of want it to be, or the transparency, so that I have more snow on other parts than other parts of the painting. Also, in this part, if you're not too happy with the way that your shadows came out, don't worry about it. Sometimes I go back in and I take a little bit of green, a little bit of brown, and I want certain parts to stand out a little bit more. So I just go back in with my detail brush. I don't have to rinse the brush again, but I'm just going to blend all of those colors together, maybe make some of those shadows pop out a little bit more of the tree. Or if I made too much white in one particular place, I'm going back in and I'm pushing the green with the brown back up so that it doesn't look like there's too much snow on the tree. Okay, so next we are going to create the little shadows for the bottoms of the trees. So right now I'm going back in, creating that lighter blue again. Mine dried up a little bit, so I'm just taking a little bit of blue, a little bit of white, and I'm mixing them together with my number 4 brush that I'm still using. And I'm kind of creating this consistency here. I kind of like how this is, so I'm just going to be placing it on the bottom, kind of flickering it out again from the end of the tree, flicking it out into the snow, making that little shadow effect, creating little lines. We're using the same technique as we're using with the background. Again, we're not pushing the paint back and forth, but rather top to side or top to bottom. And I'm going in with the medium tree first, and now I'm thinking about going into the larger tree doing that same technique. You can kind of see this happening a little bit more as we go. And we're just kind of using the same thing. So I'm just going to fast forward a little bit so that you can see the end result of the shadow. Once you have this shadow, I kind of went back in and made the little parts of the snow kind of like a walkway, or kind of like it had a indent within the snow. So I went in and made a little bit of that too, just to add an extra detail. Again, if you don't feel like adding that, that's totally okay. I just want to add more details to my scene so that it looks a little bit more realistic, or that someone has been through the Wonderland itself. So right now I'm just rinsing it out again. I'm gonna go back in with completely white, and I am using brush number 6 again, and I'm just going to blend all of this out. As you can see, I'm going a little bit back and forth because I used a little bit of paint and I want to make sure that this is like into the canvas. So I'm pressing on the canvas just a little bit and I'm blending it out as we go. Also, I'm coming back in with a little bit more blue, making sure that everything is consistent, everything is blended correctly. And I'm just going to go ahead and speed this up a little bit.